It wasn't the actual words that shattered me. It wasn't even the betrayal itself that hit the hardest. What truly broke me was the expression on her face, the way she looked at me as if I didn't matter anymore. Just moments earlier, I was her husband, the man she had built a life with, someone she once claimed she couldn't imagine being without. And in the blink of an eye, I became a stranger. A burden she had already mentally discarded. She stood near the doorway, luggage ready, her coat draped neatly over one arm. The comforting aroma of the dinner I had prepared still lingered in the air, but it didn't faze her. She barely glanced at me before uttering the words that tore my world apart. "You'll be fine, Owen. This is what's best for both of us." Both of us? I stood there stunned, trying to piece together the wreckage of her words. Sure, things had felt off lately, but nothing could have prepared me for this moment. My throat tightened as I struggled to speak. "You're really leaving?" Her only response was a tired sigh, as though she had grown weary of explaining. "I need something else. Something more thrilling." Her words struck me like a heavy blow. I felt detached from reality, as though I were watching my life unravel from the outside. "Is there someone else?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She hesitated, but only briefly. Then came the most haunting moment of all. She smiled. It wasn't a smile laced with guilt or sadness. It was quiet, barely there, like someone relieved after finishing a hard conversation and finally ready to move on. Without another word, she turned and walked out. I didn't move. My mind was reeling, replaying every memory of our life together. I thought of all the times I held her when she cried, the sacrifices I made, the things I did to make her happy. And yet she still left. I should have spoken up. I should have asked why. Demanded answers. But I stood still, frozen by the terrible truth that I had already lost her. She had walked away long before her feet actually moved toward that door. The silence hit me first. After she left, I stood in the middle of the living room, my ears filled with the sound of my own heartbeat. The familiar noises of our life, her soft humming while cooking, the rustle of pages as she read in bed, the tapping of her nails on the table while browsing her phone, were gone. Yet her presence still clung to everything. Her jacket still hung on the hook by the door. A mug of coffee, half finished, sat on the kitchen counter. The subtle scent of her perfume lingered in the air, taunting me. It was as if she had simply vanished, leaving behind only traces of who she used to be. I have no idea how long I stood there. Could have been a few minutes, could have been hours. Time had become irrelevant. At some point, without thinking, my body moved. I made my way to the kitchen, grabbed the coffee cup, and poured its contents into the sink. The sound of the liquid disappearing down the drain felt like a closing chapter, but it wasn't. Not really. I couldn't stop replaying everything in my head, desperate to find something I had missed. A hint. A red flag. Anything at all. That's when I noticed it, her phone charger. She never left without it. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. Such a tiny, insignificant object. But to me, it was a clue. Proof that she hadn't thought this through completely. That maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as certain as she appeared. That tiny sliver of hope ignited something reckless inside me. Without a plan or destination in mind, I grabbed my car keys and walked out the door. I just drove, thinking I might find her at a friend's house, maybe a coffee shop. Part of me hoped I'd see her somewhere, hesitating, second-guessing her decision. But deep down, I already knew where she had gone. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I turned into the parking lot of the Rosewood Inn, an elegant and discreet hotel on the edge of town. My stomach turned in knots as I sat there, eyes fixed on the entrance. I didn't want to believe it, but I needed to see it for myself. I got out of the car, each step feeling like I was walking through quicksand. Inside, the lobby was warm and bright, a harsh contrast to the storm churning in my chest. The receptionist didn't look up right away. I approached the counter, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi. I think my wife, she may have left something here earlier. Maybe a room key." The receptionist barely blinked as she asked for a name. I hesitated, then said Alice Whitman. Her eyes gave her away with a small flicker. "I'm sorry, sir. We can't release any guest information." "Guest? Not visitor? Not someone who just passed through?" She was staying there. I gave a tight nod and stepped back, my head spinning. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe to see her waiting in the lobby, deep in thought. Or maybe catching her in the parking lot, having second thoughts. But reality had already spoken. She was upstairs with him. I turned back to my car, walked slowly, and got inside. But I couldn't bring myself to drive away. I stayed put, hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, eyes fixed on the illuminated windows of the Rosewood Inn. She had told me I would be okay. She had said this was the right thing to do. And still, there she was, already stepping into a new chapter, as if I had never been a part of her life. For the first time since she had walked out, I wasn't overwhelmed with sorrow. I felt fury bubbling up instead. I remained parked outside the inn for what felt like hours, staring at those golden-lit windows. Somewhere behind one of them was the truth. She was in there with him. I could have turned the key, driven away, pretended this night never happened, acted like I had no clue. But that's not who I am. And even if I had wanted to, I couldn't erase what I had just seen. The reality was undeniable. My wife, no, not my wife anymore, Alice, just Alice, was inside the building with another man. Most likely lying on sheets I had paid for. My fingers dug into the steering wheel until my knuckles turned pale. I had always thought infidelity would be dramatic, like something out of a movie, tears, shouting, slammed doors. But this was cold, calculated, quiet. Alice hadn't stumbled into this moment. She had orchestrated it. She had looked me in the eye earlier that day, full of false calm, knowing she was about to break every promise. She had packed a bag, kissed my cheek, and walked out with a smug peace in her expression. I let out a long breath, watching as it fogged the windshield. I wasn't searching for revenge. I wasn't here to create a scene. I just needed the truth. I had to understand. Before I could second-guess myself, I stepped out of the car and headed for the hotel entrance. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, but my thoughts were razor-sharp. No outburst. No pleading. Just clarity. Inside, the lobby was serene, scented with fresh linens and expensive cologne. The woman at the front desk barely glanced up as I passed, moving straight toward the elevator. My heartbeat thundered in my chest as I reached out for the button, but before I could touch it, a voice cut through the quiet. "Can I help you, sir?" I turned slowly. The receptionist had finally noticed me, her expression now wary. I probably looked completely out of place. I offered a calm smile and lifted the charger she had forgotten at home. "My wife left this behind," I said. "Just wanted to drop it off real quick." She hesitated for a moment. "I can take it up to the room for you," she offered. Of course she could. That would be the professional response. But I needed more than professionalism. I lowered my voice as if I were letting her in on a surprise. "Actually, it's kind of for our anniversary. I wanted to leave it with a little note outside the door." Her face softened a bit, but she still paused. I decided to take a gamble. I let my eyes wander to the reservation book on the counter, just a glance. That was all I needed. Room 314. Room 314? I asked as if recalling it from memory. She gave a small sigh and nodded, likely assuming I was just another romantic husband. "Just don't disturb any of the guests," she added. "I won't," I assured her, stepping into the elevator before she could reconsider. The ride up felt endless. My pulse was pounding, but my face remained expressionless. If I was wrong, if I had misunderstood, then I would leave quietly. But I was sure. I knew what I'd seen. The hallway was empty, the carpet absorbing every step as I approached the door. Room 314 loomed in front of me. I hesitated. Did I really want the confirmation? Was I ready for this truth? Or was it easier to cling to a lie for a little longer? Before I could decide, I heard their voices through the door. Hers. His. Laughter. It was warm, close, full of familiarity, the kind that cuts deep when you realize it's no longer meant for you. I inched closer. My fists clenched at my sides. Then I heard her say my name. I froze. Alice's voice floated out. It was easier than I expected. He didn't even protest. Just stood there, looking pitiful. There was a pause, followed by the man's amused tone. "So, you're finally free?" I could practically hear the grin in her reply. Completely. In that moment, something inside me crumbled. I had braced for sadness, but this felt far worse. She hadn't only left me, she had ridiculed me. The woman I had once trusted beyond reason had tossed me aside without a second thought. I drew in a slow breath, held it, and then walked away. Not because I lacked strength. Not out of fear. But because I finally understood. She didn't deserve another moment of my energy. She certainly didn't deserve me. I don't remember the ride down in the elevator. I don't remember passing through the lobby or stepping back into the chilly night. What I do remember was how my heartbeat slowed, how everything around me fell into a strange, calming silence. It was finished. Not just the marriage. Not just my feelings for Alice. But the version of myself who still believed in what we used to be. The man who had once stood beside me, battling for the life we had built together, no longer existed. That version of him had vanished right in front of room 314. I climbed into my car, closed the door behind me, and just sat still. My hands trembled uncontrollably, yet no tears came. There was no rage boiling inside me anymore either. What was the use of being angry? That kind of emotion required strength, and I had none left in me. Alice had left, and somehow I was still here. I should have driven back home, crawled into bed, and tried to pretend the night was just another rough one. But I didn't. Instead, I reached for my phone and made a call. "Hey, it's me." There was a pause, followed by a sleepy voice. "Owen? What the heck, man? It's nearly midnight." I hesitated before responding. "Yeah, I know. I really need someone to talk to." There was the sound of rustling, then a heavy sigh. "Where are you?" "Rosewood Inn." That response got his full attention. "No way. Please tell me you're not serious." I stayed silent. I didn't need to confirm it. "Don't move. I'm on my way." The call ended abruptly. About 20 minutes later, a truck I knew well rolled into the lot. Ryan stepped out, running a hand through his tousled hair. He wore the same hoodie and sweatpants he probably slept in, but the expression on his face was alert and serious. Concern clouded his eyes, the kind only someone who's known you through everything could have. Ryan had been my closest friend since college, the one constant through every triumph and disaster. Now, he was the only person I could let see me like this. He took one look at me, exhaled deeply, and said, "Start from the beginning." And I did. I walked him through it all, the emotional distance, the secrets, the slow disintegration of my marriage. I told him how I'd followed her, about the hotel, and the voices I overheard outside that room. Ryan listened closely, not saying a word as his jaw grew tenser with each new piece of the story. When I finally reached the end, he let out a soft whistle and shook his head slowly. "Man, that's rough." A dry, humorless laugh escaped me. "Yeah." We sat in silence for a long while before he finally broke it. "So, what now?" That was the real question. What now? I had spent the last 10 years creating a life around Alice. Every choice, every plan, every future dream had centered on her. And in a matter of hours, that entire life had vanished. I rubbed my face, feeling the weight of it all. "I honestly don't know." Ryan nodded thoughtfully, then after a short pause, asked, "Do you still love her?" That hit harder than I was ready for. My instinct was to say yes because it made sense. Love doesn't just disappear overnight, does it? But when I searched for that longing, the deep urge to fight for us, I felt nothing. There was no heartbreak, no desperation, just emptiness. That scared me more than anything else. "I'm not sure," I admitted. Ryan looked at me for a long moment before leaning back against his truck. "She's going to regret this." I let out a small breath. "I doubt it." "No, really," he said, shaking his head. "You're one of the good ones, Owen. You've always been. People like her? They don't see what they've lost until it's far too late." Part of me wanted to challenge him, to tell him he was wrong. But another part wondered, what if he wasn't? The first night I spent alone in our house felt like walking through a dream. Everything was where it had always been, but none of it felt right. Her spot in the bed was empty, yet the shape of her body was still faintly imprinted on the mattress. Her shampoo still lingered in the shower. Her books remained untouched on the shelf. It was as if she had stepped out for a quick errand and might return any minute. But I knew she wouldn't. I tried to sleep, but my thoughts raced endlessly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hotel door. I heard her laugh echoing. I remembered the smile she wore as she walked away. At 4 in the morning, I gave up and went downstairs, making coffee like I always did. That's when I saw it, her necklace. A delicate silver chain I had given her years ago for our anniversary. It lay on the counter near the coffee machine. She never used to take it off. But now she had. I picked it up and ran it through my fingers. Had she left it behind on purpose? Was this her way of saying goodbye? A final message that she had truly moved on? I didn't know. And for the first time, I wasn't even sure I wanted to. The weeks that followed blurred together. I went through my routine, but nothing felt normal. People at work noticed the change. My manager pulled me aside a few times, suggesting time off. Friends reached out, offering kind words I didn't know how to accept. Even the neighbors gave me those awkward glances of sympathy. But throughout it all, Alice never contacted me. Not a call. Not a message. Nothing. She was gone. Absolutely, completely gone. And still, her silence was louder than anything I'd ever experienced. Then one evening, just as I started to accept that stillness, my phone rang. Her name appeared on the screen. My stomach turned in knots, but I kept calm. I let it ring twice, then answered. I had expected a cold tone, maybe even arrogance. But what I heard instead was a trembling voice. "Owen," she said softly. "Please. I need to see you." I didn't respond right away. Hearing her voice after so many quiet weeks was like reopening a wound that had barely started to heal. It was a wound she had inflicted, and I could hear the weight of it in her voice. Something had shifted. The cold, indifferent woman who had once left me smiling was no longer there. Now her tone carried hesitation, softness, vulnerability. and I hated that it still stirred something inside me. Bracing myself against the kitchen counter, I gripped my phone far too tightly. Why? I asked, the question barely out before silence followed. Then came a shaky breath. I need to see you. Her voice sent a ripple of unease through me. It wasn't simply remorse, I sensed something deeper, something more troubling. Are you okay? I asked, even though every instinct warned me not to. She hesitated before answering, not over the phone. Please, Owen. I shut my eyes. Every part of me screamed to end the call, to give her the same silence she had once given me. But that stubborn curiosity, the part of me that still craved an explanation, kept me from hanging up. Where? She exhaled, as if surprised I hadn't refused. Our spot. By the lake. Of course. The lake. It had once been ours, a refuge during those early years of marriage. Late-night drives, warm cups of coffee in hand, sitting together on the dock watching moonlight dance across the rippling water. It was a place tied to memories, to peace, to love. That was before she shattered everything. A glance at the clock told me it was close to midnight. Whatever this was, it couldn't be postponed. 15 minutes, I said before ending the call, not giving her a chance to add more. The drive felt like something out of a dream. Empty roads stretched before me while the streetlights painted ghostly shapes across the pavement. My hands clung tightly to the steering wheel as I mulled over what I was walking into. Was I being foolish? Would she twist the truth again, try to downplay what had happened, or ask me to simply move on? Or was this something different entirely? Pulling into the gravel lot near the dock, I shut off the car. The lake lay before me, vast, dark, and quiet, the moon's reflection flickering across its surface. Then I saw her. Alice was standing at the dock's edge, arms wrapped tightly around herself. She looked nothing like she had that night at the hotel, no sleek outfit, no polished hair or flawless makeup. Instead, she looked drained, like sleep had evaded her for days. When she turned toward me, her expression immediately fell apart. Owen, she said, her voice barely audible. I didn't reply. Instead, I slowly walked toward her, keeping my hands tucked into my jacket pockets and maintaining some distance between us. She swallowed hard, like she needed time to collect herself. Thank you for coming. Still, I remained silent. She took another unsteady breath. Her voice trembled. I messed up. A bitter chuckle almost escaped me. Yeah, Alice. You did. She flinched at my words, hugging herself tighter. I thought I knew what I wanted. I believed I was chasing something real. But now, I don't even know anymore. I tightened my jaw as I noticed her red, puffy eyes. She had been crying before I arrived. I was wrong, she admitted quietly. I turned my gaze to the water. Wrong about what? A hollow laugh escaped her lips. Everything. We stood there in silence for a long time. Eventually, I voiced the question that had haunted me ever since she called. Why did you do it? Her breath hitched and her shoulders shook as she tried to steady herself. Because I was selfish. I thought there had to be something more out there. Something I was missing. When her eyes met mine, I saw something I couldn't quite define. Regret, maybe. Pain, definitely. But there wasn't. It was all an illusion. The life I left you for fell apart the moment I got what I thought I wanted. I said nothing, just waited. She hesitated again. He doesn't love me. He never did. And when things started to get difficult, he walked away. My stomach turned with bitterness. Of course he had. The man she gave everything up for had never planned to stay. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt like justice had been served. But instead, all I felt was a deep, aching weariness. Alice stepped closer. Owen, I know I have no right to ask anything from you. But I need you to know. Her voice cracked as she continued, I'm sorry. Her words lingered in the air. I had imagined this moment so many times. Dreamed about how I would react if she ever came back, begging for forgiveness. I thought I'd laugh in her face, unleash every ounce of fury I had held onto. But now, as I watched her unravel in front of me, I felt nothing but emptiness. I shook my head slowly. You don't get to do this. Her eyes widened in panic. Please. No, I interrupted firmly. You don't get to break me, walk away with a smile, and then return when your world collapses. Tears streaked down her face. Owen, please. I turned back to the lake, my voice low but steady. Do you remember the night you left? She nodded, barely holding herself together. You looked relieved, I said. Like you had finally escaped. You didn't even pause. You didn't turn around. Alice let out a broken sob. Facing her once more, I kept my voice calm. So don't start now. She looked stunned, as though the full weight of her choices had just hit her. As though she finally understood she had truly lost me. I stepped away from her. Goodbye, Alice. And with that I turned and walked away. This time I was the one who didn't look back. The morning air carried a refreshing chill as I stepped outside, the soft heat of the sun slowly spreading across my skin. For the first time in what felt like ages, my mind wasn't consumed by thoughts of Alice. I wasn't stuck in a loop, reliving that evening at the hotel or replaying the conversation we had by the lake. Instead, I was simply present in the moment. Breathing. Existing. And somehow that felt like enough. I drew in a long breath, catching the scent of newly mowed grass and the faint, inviting smell of coffee drifting from a nearby house. The world hadn't paused just because my marriage came to an end. Life continued to unfold. And so would I. In the following weeks, there were changes. They didn't come all at once, nor were they grand or cinematic. Rather, they arrived in quiet, gradual ways. I began transforming the house, removing the elements that constantly reminded me of her. I gathered the shared memories, the photos, the keepsakes, her handwritten notes, and tucked them into a box, placing it in the garage. I wasn't clinging to them. I just wasn't ready to part with them entirely. And I told myself that was perfectly okay. I turned my attention back to work, to my friends, and to the simple, everyday things I had pushed aside. Ryan made sure I didn't stay shut in for too long, pulling me out into the world and reminding me that my life existed beyond the one I had shared with Alice. Laughter found its way back into my days, and the jokes I made actually felt honest again. I wasn't entirely better. Not yet. But I was making progress. One Saturday morning I was sitting at a small cafe, a book open in front of me, when I sensed someone watching. Glancing up, I noticed her at a window table. She had a gentle smile and was sipping her coffee slowly, her gaze meeting mine with warmth and curiosity. There was something in that exchange, something subtle but real. It wasn't some sweeping, romantic moment. Not love at first sight, but it was a flicker of possibility. A quiet reminder that there were still people in the world I hadn't met. That my story hadn't ended simply because Alice was no longer part of it. I paused for just a heartbeat before offering her a smile in return. Maybe it would lead nowhere. Or maybe it was the start of something entirely new. Either way, I was no longer afraid to explore what came next. For the first time in a very long while, I felt a genuine sense of hope about the days ahead. And honestly, that felt like the perfect kind of ending.